You ever had a neighbor so awful that every day felt like a battle just to exist? I did. This man would scream at us for shoveling our own driveway. He watched my underage sister mow the lawn like a creep. And one winter morning, when he charged across the yard ready to fight my family, I decided that day I'd make him regret every single thing he'd ever done to us. If you've ever had someone treat you or your family like garbage and wish karma would finally catch up, hit that like button right now. Because what you're about to hear is one of the most subtle yet deeply satisfying revenge stories you'll ever come across. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood where everyone mostly kept to themselves. Our family was peaceful. We minded our own business, kept the yard clean, waved politely at others. But then there was him, our next door neighbor. He was in his 70s, but somehow had the anger of a teenager who'd just been told to clean his room. Every little thing we did seemed to set him off. If we shoveled snow and a single flake touched his driveway, he'd stomp outside yelling about property lines. If we trimmed our hedges, he'd complain that our mess made the neighborhood look bad. At first, we tried to ignore it. My parents always said, don't give him attention, he just wants a reaction. But ignoring him only seemed to make him worse. It started small. Point one morning, we found piles of snow dumped from his yard onto ours, his way of returning what the wind had supposedly blown over. Then he began trimming our trees when we weren't home, our trees on our property. When we asked him to stop, he'd sneer and say, I'm just keeping the place decent. Someone has to. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, full of contempt, like we were beneath him. But the worst part? He started watching my little sister. She was barely 17, just trying to help with yard work, and I'd catch him staring, not glancing, but staring through his window or leaning over the fence. The kind of stare that makes your skin crawl. I told my dad, but he just sighed. He's old and bitter, son. Don't stoop to his level. But it wasn't that simple. Every time my sister went outside, I'd hover near the window, making sure that creep didn't come close. It was winter, the kind of day when your breath turns to frost the second you step outside. We were shoveling the snow in front of our house when suddenly I heard shouting, "Stop shoveling on my side." His voice cut through the cold like a knife. I turned and saw him, storming across his yard, red-faced, fists clenched. He wasn't just angry. He looked ready to fight. He charged straight toward us, screaming, "You think you can dump your crap on my property?" My heart pounded. My dad tried to reason with him, but he just kept coming. That's when something inside me snapped too. I dropped the shovel, squared my shoulders, and said quietly, "Come one step closer, and I swear I'll drop you right here." For a split second, he froze, probably realizing I wasn't that scrawny kid anymore. He spat something under his breath and turned back to his house. The police were called, but as usual, they just shrugged. "He didn't touch you. Nothing we can do." And that's when I knew if justice wasn't going to handle him, I would. It came to me randomly, a spark of genius born from pure frustration. I remembered overhearing him once, ranting about how much he hated religion, especially Jehovah's Witnesses. He called them door pests. So I thought, what if they kept showing up? The next day, I went online and filled out one of those request to visit forms with his name, his address, and a note saying he was eager to learn. Then I hit submit. A week later, I saw two well-dressed visitors walking up his driveway. From my window, I watched him open the door, and his face went from confusion to fury in seconds. He started yelling before they'd even finished saying hello. I could almost hear him screaming through the glass, "Get OFF my property." The visitors left politely, and I laughed so hard I nearly choked. Every time he'd do something, dump snow on our lawn, yell at my sister, or glare at us through his blinds, I'd submit another visit request. Sometimes I'd switch it up, write that he was interested in religious study, or that he wanted to host a Bible group. Every few weeks, they'd show up, same friendly smiles, same polite persistence. And every single time, he'd lose his mind. One morning, I was drinking coffee when I heard him shouting again. I looked out and saw him pointing a broom at the poor visitors like they were burglars. I couldn't help but grin. He was finally getting a taste of what he'd been serving us for years. Pure, relentless irritation. As time went on, he got quieter. Not nicer, just worn down. Maybe the endless visits broke something in him, or maybe life caught up. Because not long after, we stopped seeing him altogether. Turns out, karma really did step in. He was arrested for abusing his wife. I can't say I was surprised. The man who tormented his neighbors turned out to be a monster behind closed doors too. When I told my parents about the Jehovah's Witness prank years later, they just burst out laughing. My mom said, "You really were the karma he needed." Looking back, it's funny. I didn't throw punches. I didn't vandalize his property. All I did was hand his own hatred back to him, wrapped neatly in a polite knock on the door. It wasn't dramatic, but it was poetic. Sometimes revenge doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it just has to ring the doorbell. The final visit I saw was the best one. It was pouring rain, and two new missionaries showed up, cheerful, smiling, holding pamphlets. He opened the door, saw them, and just lost it. He threw his arms up and screamed, "Why do you people keep coming here?" And as they left, one of them said kindly, "Because you asked us to." I've never laughed harder in my life. That was the day I knew the score was finally even. I learned something from that man, that cruelty often comes from misery. But I also learned something else. You don't have to become your enemy to defeat them. Sometimes, the quietest revenge hits the loudest. If this story gave you that finally justice feeling, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what your favorite subtle revenge story is. And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, where karma always finds a way to knock right on the door.